Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable, high-performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hi there, and welcome to today's episode of The Inner Edge with myself, whatever my name is. Anyway, today's episode is dealing with inner damage. Inner damage. Now, the more I thought about the idea for this episode, the more I realized I could actually do quite a long episode, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to explore it a little bit. Hopefully it's enough time for you to maybe look at this with a slightly different perspective, but let's see how we get on. So I suppose to lead us into it, just consider, I suppose when I think about damage, I mean, initially you can think about your body. I mean, your body, if it gets damaged, it has this inbuilt intelligence to repair itself. So if I get a cut on my hand, it will repair itself. I don't need to tell it what to do. But having said that, sometimes you might get an injury, or you might have to have some work done because there's internal damage physically on you, and you need the outside help of an expert. So there are subtleties around damage. So some of the damage will heal itself, and some of it won't. It needs help. So when I did my Achilles in there 3 years ago, it was completely severed, and there was no way any sort of mental work was going to help fix that in my body. Reality has its moments. So I had to get a very good surgeon in Dublin, in St. Vincent Hospital, and I was very grateful for his work, and he did a great job, put it back together. But what happens when you're with the damage that's inside? And I actually think, I think everyone's going to relate to today's episode if you're honest. But damage, inner damage, can cause all sorts of issues in your work and your relationships and your life and just your own sense of being. And just to kind of kick it off, I would say it's vital, absolutely vital, to deal with inner damage, especially damage that sticks. Now, you can blame my windscreen guy for this episode because this was the start of me thinking about it. There's inspiration all around, folks. You know, if you're looking for it, this is where these ideas come from my life. So, I should know, maybe about 6 weeks ago, I was driving on the motorway, and a chip from a car ahead of me, a kind of a small stone chip, flew backwards as happens, and it hit the windscreen, and very small chip was on the windscreen. So my insurance covers that, and I thought, okay, I need to get that sorted. But because I'm in the summertime, or at the end of summertime here now, but when it's happened, it was at the start of summer, and there was lots going on, and I thought, I'll just delay it. I'll do it on the far side of all the family activities and holidays. What's the big deal? And it wasn't really a big deal, but in that intervening time, the chip grew, so the cracks grew. So essentially, if I got the windscreen guy to get at it when it happened, wasn't that big a job. It would have been done in about 15 minutes, which is what he told me. But when he saw it, he realized, actually, I've got to change the entire windscreen. Now, skeptical amongst you might be thinking, it was a bit of a scam. Who knows? But to be fair, the crack had grown. It was quite big. So I thought it was logical. Smaller would have been easier, but because of the delay, so to me, that's damage. Not tackling while it happened caused a bigger issue. And I think that's true for a lot of different things, both in business, in leadership, in life, and for yourself, and of course for windscreens. So if something happens, or when something happens that you could call was, let's say, inner damage, if you can grab it quickly and deal with it, you minimize the ripples of that. You minimize other things happening. You minimize future pain. If you ignore it and you don't deal with it properly and you leave it in there, I think the cracks will grow, and the cracks will come into certain things like your confidence, like your clarity, like your relationships, like your results. Something similar happened to me as well in my own personal life, just in case you're thinking, who's this guy Shane, and he has it all sorted. In some areas, maybe I have it sorted to a degree. With other areas, I'm kind of stupid. This is me slagging myself, but again, start of June, I was playing catch ball with my son Sam out the back garden, we're throwing tennis ball to each other, just practicing eye-hand coordination, having a bit of fun. And without realizing it, I drifted backwards underneath a gazebo roof. And as he threw the ball, I forgot where I was. I didn't realize where I was. And I jumped up. My finger went straight into the roof. And it was pretty swollen. And being a typical guy, I guess, I went, it'll be grand. I don't need to get that x-rayed. 6 weeks later, finger still not right. Couldn't bend it. And my sister, who's a brilliant physio, said, Shane, I think that's broken. You need to get it x-rayed. So Shane goes off to get it x-rayed, of course. You know the end of the story. It was fractured. But because I delayed the whole thing, delayed attacking the damage, fixing the damage, now I've been told there in the last couple of weeks that it's going to take about 3 months of rehab to get it right. If I had gone on the day that it happened, got the x-ray, got it addressed, it would have been dramatically quicker, probably about 6 weeks. So there you go, another little analogy. So damage, that's the physical, but also it was Shane's maybe pride or ego or whatever wouldn't let him attack it. Now, if you go on the inner side with business, and I'm thinking of a client here now in a large tech company, very smart executive, very smart leader, great leader actually. But there was a conversation with somebody in that company that he had, and he took the comment badly. It was a challenging conversation, but then it was a specific comment that he took badly. And he took that and let it stew. And he played that meeting over and over and over again in his head. So much to the extent that it really affected his mood, which then rippled into his performance. It actually rippled into his team. He was having fights then with his wife, who he used to never have fights with. It affected literally everything, his sleep, his health. And it wasn't until we kind of got together in terms of a coaching session when I was digging around saying, like, what's going on around this guy? And eventually it came out of this meeting. And he essentially had a grudge. But the way he told me the story, from my point of view, I thought, oh, he's misinterpreted what that guy meant. Anyway, long story short, he went off to find the guy, clarify what he meant. Guy said, no, I didn't mean what you thought I meant. I mean the opposite. So actually what he meant was a positive. And the guy could not believe it. So that's an example of taking inner damage from a conversation through your own mind and misinterpreting something, but stewing on it, which a lot of people do. Then this guy was very, very smart. I've done the same myself. Maybe you have too. I'm thinking of a lot of entrepreneurs in business have very short fuses. Now, there's a whole seminar on this particular subject, but I'll just throw in a couple of things, particularly if they haven't done much work on themselves, or they haven't done work with a coach or a mentor in particular, or increased their own awareness of how their behavior impacts on things. There is a disorder that is called IED, intermittent explosive disorder. Now, what that is, I mean, psychologists are great at naming things, but it's basically where somebody has repeated sudden episodes of aggression, sometimes violence, could be impulsive, angry outbursts, where essentially the person reacts hugely out of proportion to the situation or to the people around them. And a lot of entrepreneurs can be like this, but generally it's coming from something from the past. It's coming from some unresolved issue from the past, a trauma. And in that kind of situation, it does require external help, I believe, unless the person is really, really aware. But it's very, very unlikely you're going to be able to deal with that yourself. It requires a level of awareness and also some skill from a professional. So in that kind of context, I wouldn't muck around. I kind of go, okay, I need to deal with myself here. I need to get some external help. But so many business people, in particular men, women are a bit better, but still sometimes reluctant, but men in particular, if you're listening to this and that is you, go talk to somebody. You can deal with that, but that is coming from damage from the past. Now somebody might go, oh, well, that's the way I am. People around me just have to deal with it. That's a different conversation because that's the ego. And then I'm thinking about, I suppose, from my world and my experience, obviously I'm dealing a lot of the time with business people. I remember sitting down with a very wealthy businesswoman. And at the end of the meal, without them realizing it, I actually had gone off on my way to the restroom. I paid for the bill. just as a treat. And when she heard that I'd bought the meal, she literally looked at me in stunned silence with her mouth dropping to the floor. And then she started to cry. And it came out through conversation afterwards that she had never bought anybody lunch, ever, even though she was very, very wealthy. And the reason for that was because of something that happened in her past, which was to do with something in her family around money. And it really affected how she saw money, whether she deserved it. But also, she also had a belief in there that it could all disappear very quickly. So she had to hold on to that money. And so people, this is one tiny example of why sometimes people can hold on to money, maybe be perceived to be mean by others. But that is from inner damage, unaddressed inner damage. It's the crack from that small little stone on the windscreen that's just weeds its way through the entire windscreen, which essentially is your entire life. And it comes out in very weird, strange ways. Now, my definition, I guess, of inner damage is very simple. I think it's thought plus emotion on repeat. So if I have, for example, a grudge or something bad happened, like my tech company guy, well, then I'm going to play that thought or those series of thoughts or memories in my mind of the meeting, what somebody said, and I give a lot of emotional intensity into it. And it kind of really sticks in me. So I'm kind of building the damage and the flaw into me. I'm making the crack bigger in the windscreen without realizing it, which is what a lot of people do when bad stuff, inverted commas, happens. And I have worked with many entrepreneurs, particularly from or during the great crash time, 08, 09, 10, where you could consider that that time really was so severe for so many business people that in effect it was almost like a trauma. And there's a lot of damage done to people's minds at that time. Now, if I was working with somebody, part of my job was to prevent that inner damage. But what's funny is that even when the pandemic hit and some new clients came on board working with me, part of what I had to address was to remove the cracks in their windscreen, to remove the inner damage, so that they could see properly. So where do you think you might have some inner damage? Where do you think it might show up? It's generally showing up somewhere where you're not happy with your behavior, or you're not maybe embarrassed about something, or you're annoyed at yourself over sometimes the way you behave. I think it'd be unreasonable to say that nobody's in inner damage. It's a very rare person unless they've really done a lot of work on themselves. Because inner damage can really show up as well in things like overeating, overdrinking, overindulging in things like alcohol or drugs. It can be a compensating factor for perhaps not feeling great inside. But I don't think it has to be that complicated in terms of solving it. In terms of, yes, I think it's important to get external professional help, because why wouldn't you? In the same way that I went to my surgeon or doctor to help my Achilles or my finger. There's some great people out there doing great things. But I guess in the short term, when things happen, when bad things happen, or you perceive to be bad things happen, difficult things happen, because life and business is a contact sport, as I often say, then maybe the simplest way of all is to be aware that just by not giving repeated attention to something, in Ireland, we love to talk. And so if something bad happens, yeah, you go off, you might let off some steam. That's good. Don't keep it in. But if you keep on telling the same story to every person that you meet, that's essentially building the cracks into the windscreen. So can you recognize damage, inner damage, for what it is? Thought plus emotional intensity, emotion with intensity. A lot of damage, most of the inner damage that we experience, actually, if you get down to it, seems to me that we're the ones doing it to ourselves. I mean, it's bad enough that something bad happened to cause inner damage or upset, but it's much worse to keep playing it on a loop inside in your mind. And so maybe the final thought I'll leave with you on this is, when it comes to inner damage, I mean, I am a fan of using professionals, but I'm not a fan of overusing professionals, because I think sometimes you can just stir up problems in somebody's mind, and in a way, that's not good for them either. For me, it seems to me, in my experience, that reducing or preventing inner damage could be as simple as just letting things go. Just let them go. Try it out. If anything in particular struck you from this, let me know. Fire me a question, share a comment, share an insight. I'd love to hear from you. Take care. Ciao.